Edwin Fletcher had never considered himself a spiritual man. Throughout most of his early adulthood, he approached life pragmatically, inclined to trust only the tangible and the rational. He worked as an assistant manager at a small manufacturing plant outside his hometown, kept a modest apartment, and filled his weekends with unremarkable errands or the occasional hike through nearby woods. His routine was comfortable, and though he sometimes felt a vague yearning for something more meaningful, he rarely allowed himself to dwell on intangible questions about life and death. That posture began to shift one winter evening after a phone call changed the course of his life. His mother, suffering from a heart condition, had passed away in her sleep. She had lived alone in the old family house 2 hours outside the city. Edwin had planned to visit her soon, but pressing work obligations had caused him to postpone the trip. When the call came from the local hospital, it left him with a consuming sense of guilt and regret. He remembered the many times she had urged him to come for a simple dinner and how easily he had found excuses to delay. Now, the chance was gone forever, replaced by a hollow certainty that he had lost one of the few people who had offered him unconditional love. In the weeks that followed the funeral, he learned the painful reality of living with unresolved grief. Mornings brought a dull emptiness, and nights passed in restless sleep or abrupt awakenings from nameless anxieties. At first, he dismissed these disturbances as normal symptoms of mourning. The weight of regret bore down on him. He found it difficult to focus at work and dreaded returning to the quiet of his apartment. He wondered what he should do with the old house that now stood empty, filled with memories of a life that ended too soon. As time moved forward, Edwin discovered that his usual means of coping were insufficient. Reading did not help, neither did burying himself in small tasks. He attempted to see a counselor, but discontinued the sessions, feeling that they did little more than expose his anguish without offering relief. He began avoiding casual conversations, uncomfortable with sympathy that only reminded him of his loss. Emotionally, he drifted into a sort of numbness, rarely showing outward signs of distress, but never feeling at peace. Several months after his mother's passing, as early spring crept into the city's weather patterns, Edwin's nights grew troubled by an odd, recurring dream. It began with him standing in a hazy corridor that resembled no place he knew in waking life. The walls appeared indistinct, as if carved from pale light rather than solid material. Often he sensed he was not alone in this corridor, but whoever accompanied him stayed out of direct sight. The dream ended whenever he glimpsed a silhouette that vaguely resembled his mother's figure, receding through a door at the far end, leaving him to awaken in a rush of confusion and sorrow. This same dream, with slight variations, visited him almost nightly. Each time, he awoke with a pounding heart, uncertain if the experience held deeper meaning or was merely the product of unresolved guilt. At first, Edwin tried to set aside these nighttime visions. He told himself the mind often conjures illusions of lost loved ones as part of the grief process. However, a shift occurred when the dreams became more vivid and more personal. The corridor's walls started to show faint images of places he recognized: the living room of the old family home, a memory of his mother playing the piano, the orchard behind the house where he once climbed trees as a boy. These images would float across the surfaces, flickering in and out, so lifelike that they pulled him deeper into the dream state. He began waking in tears, shaken by the feeling that his mother was truly trying to make contact. Unsure how to interpret these recurring dreams, he turned to late-night internet browsing, searching for any clue about dreams of deceased relatives. He came across an overwhelming number of personal testimonies, stories of departed loved ones offering messages of comfort or advice. He also found more outlandish theories about ghosts and astral planes, which he struggled to take seriously. Yet his nightly experiences made him question his previous disbelief. Each subsequent dream seemed to expand in detail, as though a narrative was unfolding. There were moments when he saw the silhouette of his mother more clearly, standing in the corridor, seeming to beckon him forward. This pattern continued for weeks until one night, he found himself deeper in the dream than ever before. He was still in the corridor, but the walls exuded a subtle, luminescent glow, and the air vibrated with hushed energy, The silhouette appeared again, clearer than in prior dreams, taking on distinct features reminiscent of his mother's gentle posture. Though no spoken words were exchanged, Edwin sensed an unmistakable communication. He awoke abruptly, his heart racing with the impression that she wanted to tell him something important, as if cautioning him about a future event or offering direction for his life. Upon rising, he remembered no exact statement, only a powerful feeling that a message had been imparted. This dream triggered a series of curious coincidences in his waking life. For instance, the following day, he almost forgot to complete a critical safety procedure at work, only to be interrupted by a coworker. The coworker's intervention narrowly prevented an oversight that could have led to serious equipment damage. Edwin couldn't shake the sense that he had been subtly guided to avoid a catastrophe, as if the dream's intangible caution had manifested in daily life. A similar occurrence happened a week later. While driving to the grocery store, he felt a sudden compulsion to take a different route. That small detour spared him from a major accident at an intersection he would normally have passed. These near-miss incidents intensified his unease. He began to wonder whether his mother's presence in the dream corridor was a protective influence, gently steering him away from harm. Increasingly certain that the dreams might be more than random illusions, Edwin began meticulously recording them in a journal. Every night, upon waking, he jotted down any images, feelings, or fleeting impressions he remembered. Over time, he noticed recurring motifs. He often saw an archway at the end of the corridor, and behind this archway lay a room that felt both familiar and unknown. When he focused on that mental image, the shape of an old rocking chair from his childhood home took form, rocking slowly as if someone invisible occupied it. The corridor itself was not static. It branched off into side hallways, each containing dreamlike glimpses of memories. Some glimpses were from his mother's final months of life, while others were from his early boyhood. On occasion, he felt a wave of warmth, like the gentle radiance of a strong maternal presence. Around this period, Edwin became aware of subtle changes in his personality. He became kinder to his coworkers and more attentive, as if some intangible sense of compassion had been awakened. He visited an old friend he had been neglecting for years, spontaneously urging a reconciliation after a small argument. He found that small acts of empathy soothed the sorrow that lingered in his chest. He questioned if this was simply part of the healing process or if his mother's continued guidance, perceived in dream form, was reshaping his day-to-day life in a subtle but profound way. Midway through summer, Edwin started to have a more direct kind of message in his dreams. Although he never heard words, certain symbols and impressions recurred strongly enough that he could interpret them upon waking. He repeatedly sensed the call to address unresolved issues in his life, specifically to reconcile with his estranged younger brother, James, who lived in another state. The two had parted on poor terms some years back due to a misunderstanding about inheritance from their late father. Edwin had always postponed attempts at communication. Now, each night, the dream corridor highlighted old images of them as children playing together, while the silhouette of their mother stood by, radiating gentle encouragement. The repeated emphasis on brotherhood led him to contact James at last, bridging the emotional gap that had festered between them. Their initial interaction was awkward, but over the following weeks, it transformed into a more sincere reconnection. Edwin viewed this as yet another instance where maternal guidance from beyond seemed to be shaping his decisions. People in his daily life started to notice changes. Colleagues noted that he appeared calmer and more introspective. His boss saw a drop in his tardiness or absent-minded mistakes. Edwin's old friend, the one he had visited not long ago, felt that he emanated a quiet grace that had not been present before. Edwin himself realized that the persistent ache in his chest, the grief and guilt from his mother's death, had softened, if not fully vanished. He had begun to sense an undercurrent of purpose that infused even mundane tasks. This subtle transformation convinced him that the repeated dream contact was real in its effect, if not quantifiably proven. However, not everything remained comforting. At times, the dreams revealed darker facets of memory and regret. He sometimes saw fleeting shadows at the far edges of the corridor, giving him the uncomfortable sense of other presences lurking in that liminal space. On a few occasions, he felt overwhelmed by guilt-laden scenes from the past, arguments he once had with his mother, times he had disappointed her, or even small acts of negligence that took on grave importance in the intense atmosphere of the dream. These experiences left him drained by morning, uncertain whether the corridor was a place of healing or a crucible, forcing him to confront his shortcomings. Despite the painful content, he understood that the process of self-examination was beneficial. The more open he became to these revelations, the more coherent the corridor seemed. One night, the dream changed in a significant way. As he wandered through the corridor, he noticed an open door leading to the orchard behind his childhood home. The orchard was cast in dreamlike twilight, with tree branches forming shifting silhouettes against a sky of gentle, unearthly color. He stepped through that door, feeling the dream intensify. The orchard's ground was strewn with fallen apples and leaves, though the air was unnaturally still. In the center stood the same silhouette, no longer a blurred figure, but a recognizable form resembling his mother in her later years. Unlike past dreams, the presence glowed with a subtle luminescence, and although there were no spoken words, Edwin felt an urgent wave of love and reassurance. The orchard scene glimmered with a kind of warmth that transcended anything he had felt since her passing. While the figure's face remained somewhat veiled by dream mist, her posture and bearing were unmistakable. This experience awakened him in tears, a mixture of sorrow and comfort. He began to think of the orchard scene as a bridge, a threshold for deeper communication that might transcend the limitations of typical dreams. Uncertain how to proceed, he started seeking out quiet times in the evening, attempting to meditate or pray for clarity, even though he had never been religious. He yearned to revisit that orchard space in his dreams, convinced that the maternal presence was guiding him toward acceptance and healing. Over subsequent nights, the orchard did reappear. The corridor was still the entry point, yet more frequently the dream progressed into that orchard realm. With each transition, he experienced an ever stronger sense of his mother's presence. Bit by bit, visual details sharpened. He recognized her favored hairstyle from old photographs, the texture of her sweater, the shape of her hands. Emotions washed through him in waves of both sorrow and relief, so intense that upon awakening, he sometimes sobbed into his pillow. The dreams were cathartic, giving him the release he had not achieved in therapy sessions or through conversation with friends. Encouraged by these dream encounters, Edwin decided to spend weekends at the old family house rather than leaving it empty. The property needed upkeep, so he took on minor repairs and gradually sorted through boxes of keepsakes and old letters. He unearthed items he never knew existed: scrapbooks from his mother's youth, pressed flowers from her wedding day, notes from her closest friends describing her as a devoted and empathetic woman. These discoveries made him appreciate her even more, and he slowly forgave himself for his years of emotional distance. On one such weekend, as dusk fell over the orchard, he felt an odd compulsion to walk among the trees. The orchard had become overgrown over time, and the path was strewn with fallen branches. Though he felt uneasy walking in the dark, he took a flashlight and ventured in anyway, drawn by a sense of invisible beckoning. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. At one point, he paused at an old apple tree that had been his mother's favorite. Although the wind was calm, the tree's branches seemed to sway, stirring the leaves to produce a gentle rustling sound. In that moment, he felt a presence so strong that he nearly dropped the flashlight. His chest tightened, and an uncanny warmth enveloped him. While no voice spoke, he sensed an unspoken message that he was on the right path, that healing was within reach. The orchard under the moonlight felt like an echo of his dreams, bridging waking life and the corridor realm. Returning to the house, he had difficulty sleeping, but that night's dream carried him directly into the orchard scene. His mother's silhouette approached him more closely than ever before. For the first time, he glimpsed her face in partial detail, albeit rendered in the softened glow of the dream. Her expression conveyed a deep, abiding love mixed with sadness, as though she grieved his isolation but celebrated his willingness to reconnect. He felt an almost electric surge of compassion. Then the orchard's light began to fade. He sensed that he should express his gratitude, even if he could not speak it out loud. Tears blurred his dream vision until he could no longer see clearly. Moments later, he woke up with the echo of that presence etched in his mind. Not every subsequent dream was so dramatic. Some nights, the corridor reappeared without leading to the orchard. Occasionally, the orchard was present but empty, bathed in silent moonlight. Still, the general pattern remained, and he treasured each opportunity to feel his mother's spirit. In between these experiences, he continued living and working, finding that his mental state was calmer, more grounded. He re-established contact with various relatives, visited neighbors who remembered his mother fondly, and became open to the small joys in life. Acts of compassion became his way of honoring his mother's memory. Despite these improvements, one lingering question troubled him. Was it his mother's spirit truly reaching out, or were these dreams solely self-generated illusions born from his grief? His logical side argued that the mind sometimes constructs elaborate narratives to cope with loss. Yet his emotional experiences felt too vivid, and the improbable coincidences in daily life, that sudden protective impulse that saved him from accidents or mistakes, seemed beyond mere chance. Ultimately, he recognized that no definitive proof existed, and that perhaps certainty was impossible. His acceptance of the dreams as genuinely meaningful gave them power to shape his life, whether or not they had an external origin. In early autumn, he experienced a breakthrough dream that altered his perspective on mortality. It began as usual in the corridor, but there was a new doorway, half lit, as if beckoning him to explore territory he had yet to visit. When he stepped through, he found himself in what looked like a vast library with high ceilings. The shelves reached infinitely upward, filled with countless volumes of unmarked spines. The atmosphere glowed with a soft, ambient light, and the air carried a faint whisper-like hum, as though the books themselves emitted a subtle chorus. Across the library's marble floor, a single path led to a reading table at the center, where he saw the silhouette of his mother, hands folded gently on the table's surface. In the dream, even without spoken words, she conveyed an impression of calm. She opened one of the large volumes, its pages covered in writing that seemed alive with shifting symbols. He felt she was encouraging him to read, yet the symbols on the page eluded his comprehension. The sense of significance was overwhelming. This library seemed to represent the accumulated knowledge of souls, or perhaps the memories shared by those who had passed on. A wave of reverence and awe coursed through him. After a timeless moment in that dream library, he sensed that his mother was presenting him with a choice: either remain tethered to grief or embrace a path of acceptance that included acknowledging the continuity of love beyond physical boundaries. The magnitude of the revelation filled him with humility, as if he had only now begun to glimpse the deeper layers of existence. He felt that the corridor, orchard, and library were different facets of a sacred space, bridging the mortal world and the realm of the spirit. Upon waking from that dream, Edwin lay in bed, replaying every detail. Though outwardly his life had improved, he realized he still carried fragments of guilt that weighed him down. The library vision seemed to hint at a broader dimension of understanding. Inspired, he revisited the diaries he had found in his mother's belongings, searching for anything about libraries or hidden realms in dreams. He found only tangential references, such as her fascination with near-death experiences she had read about in magazines. However, he also discovered a letter she had written but never mailed, addressed to him. In it, she confessed her own regrets for not pushing him harder to maintain close family ties, and expressed her unwavering pride in the man he had become. Reading those words, he felt a surge of emotion that confirmed the bond between them reached across the divide of life and death. That same week, he decided to honor his mother's memory in a more tangible way. After consulting with his brother James, he chose not to sell the family house, but rather to renovate it gradually and keep it as a place for gatherings or quiet retreats. This choice felt aligned with the guidance he had been sensing from the dreams. He poured time and resources into repairing the orchard fences and clearing dead branches, turning it into a peaceful haven. James visited occasionally, and they had heartfelt conversations, forging a closeness that had been missing for years. Meanwhile, the corridor dreams persisted, though their intensity fluctuated. Sometimes, weeks passed with minimal recollection of his nighttime encounters. Other times, the dream experiences returned with vivid potency. He documented them faithfully in his journal, which had now grown into a thick volume of handwritten accounts. Reflecting on these pages, he noticed a subtle progression. Early entries focused on guilt, confusion, and fear, while later entries conveyed acceptance, guidance, and spiritual harmony. The orchard and library scenes formed a cohesive narrative that echoed his evolving emotional state. As the winter months arrived, Edwin began to sense a forthcoming resolution. The corridor dream recurred with an air of finality. This time, the silhouette he associated with his mother appeared at the corridor's entrance rather than at its distant end. She seemed more radiant, as if enveloped in a gentle, luminous aura. The orchard beckoned beyond, but she made no motion to lead him there. Instead, he felt a surge of warmth and recognition, and a deep inner voice, not heard audibly, whispered reassurance that her guidance was no longer needed in the same way it once was. A wave of sadness mingled with gratitude washed over him. The dream ended calmly, with no abrupt awakening. In the following days, he experienced a profound sense of emotional release. He had not forgotten his mother. Indeed, her memory felt closer to him than ever. But the sorrow that once clung to his every moment had loosened its hold. He believed that her spirit had helped him find a path to healing, reconciling with family and confronting the regrets that once tormented him. Though some might dismiss his belief as wishful thinking, he was convinced that love had transcended mortal separation, guiding him through illusions of time and physical distance. Looking back, he saw how far he had come. The unremarkable man who once avoided introspection and emotion had awakened to the possibility that life is more mysterious and interwoven than he could have imagined. He felt he owed it to his mother to live with more purposeful kindness, appreciating each day as a gift that could be gone in an instant. The orchard was now a place of calm reflection. Sometimes he sat against the trunk of the old apple tree, remembering the shape of that rocking chair in the dream, recalling the invisible presence that had once comforted him. The corridor in his dreams still existed somewhere in his imagination, or, as he believed, beyond the veils of normal perception. On the anniversary of his mother's passing, Edwin arranged a small gathering at the family house. He invited James, a couple of close friends, and an aunt who had remained supportive all along. They shared a quiet meal, lit candles in memory of all those who had passed, and strolled through the orchard as the sun dipped below the horizon. Although no supernatural events transpired that evening, Edwin perceived a sense of grace permeating the atmosphere. The orchard seemed at peace, as though it too had found a resting balance. That night, after everyone had left, Edwin remained alone in the house, gazing out the window into the yard. Moonlight lit up the orchard's rows of trees in pale silver. He reflected on the labyrinthine journey of his grief, the dreams that had ushered him through it, and the knowledge that love endures, bridging worlds seen and unseen. He recognized that uncertainty still lingered. He had no absolute proof about what truly dwelled behind those dream corridors, nor could he articulate how the orchard or the library realm coexisted with the physical world. Nevertheless, he sensed no further need for proof. The quiet sense of completion he felt was enough. In the final hours of the night, he let himself drift into sleep. Strangely, he did not dream of corridors or orchard vistas. Instead, he experienced a deep, untroubled rest, free from guilt. By morning, a gentle realization dawned on him. Perhaps his mother's spirit had offered all that she needed to convey. He would always carry her influence, not as a burden, but as a guiding light. The corridor was not gone forever. It could reappear whenever life demanded a reminder of love's persistence. But for now, both he and that loving presence could rest, having reached a new harmony between the living and the departed. In the days and weeks that followed, life continued with its daily tasks, but the intangible connection remained in Edwin's heart. He felt calmer, surer of his capacity to face the future. Occasionally, subtle moments reminded him of the dream corridor, a flash of memory while hearing a particular melody, or an inexplicable warmth at a moment of decision. Each reminder gave him confidence that love's reach extended far beyond mortal boundaries. He suspected that others, too, had their own corridor dreams. Some recognized them, others brushed them off as mere illusions. Edwin never sought to evangelize his experience, recognizing that each individual processes grief in unique ways. He simply lived with an open mind, ready to embrace those unexplainable touches of grace. The orchard flourished under his care. The library dream remained a symbol of deeper truths, and the corridor vision served as a subtle pillar in his inner life. Over time, he quietly passed along bits of encouragement to friends who lost loved ones, suggesting they remain open to gentle signs that might arise in their dreams or day-to-day coincidences. Whether these signs were psychological or genuinely paranormal no longer mattered to him. What mattered was that genuine love does not die. It transforms, weaving its essence through the tapestry of existence. Thus, Edwin came to terms with the loss of his mother. Though he occasionally felt the sting of longing, the bitterness of regret had all but lifted. He cherished the memory of her silhouette and the orchard scene as a testament to the power of unseen bonds. He recognized that, in confronting his sorrow, he had become more empathetic, more alive. The dream contact was far from an isolated event in his mind. It had threaded itself into his being and guided him toward reconciliation, self-examination, and hope. He had ventured into the depths of grief only to emerge with a gentler spirit and a renewed faith in the enduring potential of love, even against the greatest divide humans can know. Even in quiet hours, when he was alone at the old house in winter, listening to the wind that rattled the branches outside, a gentle hush would remind him of that corridor. He would take a moment, close his eyes, and sense that intangible corridor leading to the orchard or the library. Then he would feel his mother's presence, not as a ghost, but as an abiding warmth that assured him he was not truly alone. When he reopened his eyes, life's tasks awaited, but his heart felt a quiet contentment. This subtle interplay of dream and reality became his truth, a demonstration that while death ends a physical presence, the love shared between souls can continue to nurture and guide, long after one is gone. With this internalized conviction, Edwin stepped forward into each new day, unafraid of the unknown. His mother's legacy shaped his choices, fostering acts of compassion he might once have neglected. He realized that what he had experienced in dreams could never be pinned down by purely logical explanation, yet it carried an undeniable authenticity. The boundary between worlds, he concluded, might be far more permeable than he or anyone else imagined. Eventually, life's current carried him toward new chapters, new friendships, fresh responsibilities, and personal growth. Yet through it all, the gentle reverberation of those dreams reminded him that love is the one constant that transcends even the silence of death.